The doors of Al Yamama Palace didn't just open that night, they revealed a secret dinner that could quietly redraw the future of the crown itself. Behind those gold-trimmed walls, beneath chandeliers older than most modern nations, Prince William sat across from the Saudi king in a moment so controlled, so private, and so loaded with unspoken meaning that even the palace insiders later admitted this was no ordinary royal visit. This was not ceremony. This was positioning. And what happened over that lavish silent dinner didn't just feed two powerful men, it fed a future monarch's ambition. Just days before that moment, the public thought they knew the story. They saw the charming smiles, the polished interviews, the confident prince sipping coffee on national television, casually joking as if nothing had changed. But beneath that calm exterior was a man carrying the invisible weight of a crown already pressing down on his shoulders. He had just returned from Saudi Arabia, a trip officially described as diplomatic outreach, but privately whispered about as something far more consequential. He wasn't just visiting, he was stepping into rooms where kings test future kings. And when he appeared on television afterwards, speaking with calm precision, something in his tone gave it away. He wasn't recounting a trip, he was revealing a transformation. The cameras captured his smile, but they couldn't capture what palace aides later described as the shift. Because while the public heard lighthearted stories about falcons and desert landscapes, those who knew what truly happened understood this was about something deeper. This was about control, influence, and a silent rehearsal for the moment he would no longer be Prince William, but King William. And that rehearsal had begun over dinner. The invitation itself was already unusual. It wasn't announced with pomp, it wasn't broadcast to the press, it wasn't designed for headlines. Instead, it was delivered quietly, directly, like an invitation into the inner circle of power itself. And when William accepted, he wasn't just accepting hospitality, he was accepting recognition. Recognition as an equal. Recognition as a future sovereign whose influence would outlive everyone at that table that evening. The palace glowed under desert light. Motorcades arrived in silence, tires whispering against stone roads polished by centuries of authority. William stepped out, dressed not in his familiar Western suit, but in a traditional bisht, sand-colored, embroidered in gold, gifted by the Saudi crown prince himself. It wasn't just clothing, it was symbolism. It was an unspoken message, you belong here. Inside, the air was heavy with controlled calm. Every movement choreographed, every glance measured, every gesture recorded not by cameras but by memory. Because dinners like this don't exist for show. They exist to test intent, to measure resolve, to determine whether the man across the table is ready for what comes next. And William didn't hesitate. He listened more than he spoke. He observed everything, the pauses between sentences, the weight of each word, the way power doesn't shout in those rooms, it breathes. Those present later whispered that he carried himself not like a visitor, but like someone already preparing to inherit something far greater than himself. He wasn't trying to impress, he was trying to understand. Because this wasn't just about Saudi Arabia, this was about the future of monarchy itself. For decades, monarchy survived by remaining distant, symbolic, untouchable. But William understood something dangerous. That distance could also become weakness, and weakness in a world driven by alliances and influence could slowly erase relevance. So he was rewriting the rules quietly, replacing distance with presence, silence with calculated engagement. Over that dinner, conversations moved beyond ceremony. They entered territory rarely spoken of publicly: climate cooperation, cultural exchange, strategic partnerships designed not just for today, but for decades ahead. One insider revealed that William proposed something so unexpected, so bold, that it stunned even seasoned royal observers. He suggested building a shared cultural monument, an architectural bridge connecting British and Saudi heritage, designed to outlast both of them. The response wasn't immediate. It didn't need to be. Because in rooms like that, approval isn't given with applause, it's given with silence. And the silence spoke volumes. What made that dinner so explosive wasn't what was said publicly, it was what it implied privately. Because for the first time, William wasn't just representing the crown, he was shaping its future. He was demonstrating that he understood power not as something inherited, but as something cultivated, protected, and expanded through relationships built long before the crown ever touched his head. And that realization didn't start in Saudi Arabia. It had been building quietly for months. His global visits to Estonia, Brazil, the Vatican, South Korea weren't random diplomatic appearances. They were deliberate steps in a carefully constructed strategy. Every handshake, every private meeting, every off off-camera conversation was another piece of a puzzle only a future king could see clearly. He wasn't chasing headlines, he was building influence in silence. Insiders noticed the difference immediately after his return. His posture changed, his confidence sharpened. He began moving with the calm certainty of someone no longer preparing for the future, but becoming it that even his father, King Charles, reportedly observed it. Because what William experienced during that secret dinner wasn't just diplomacy, it was initiation. He had entered the inner circle of global authority where monarchs don't just symbolize nations, they shape them. And perhaps the most revealing moment came not during the dinner itself, but afterward, and as his jet prepared to leave Saudi soil, William reportedly sat in silence, holding a small brass falcon gifted to him by the Saudi royal family. Carved into its base were 4 words: intention builds bridges. He stared at those words longer than anyone expected, because he understood exactly what they meant. This wasn't about one dinner. This was about legacy, that this was about proving to himself, to the crown, and to the world that he was no longer just waiting for kingship. He was preparing to redefine it. And the most shocking part, he didn't need to announce it. The world was already starting to see it. By the time Prince William's jet wheels touched British soil, something invisible had already shifted, and the palace could feel it before the headlines even caught up. The man who stepped off that aircraft wasn't just returning from a diplomatic tour. He was returning from a test. And those who understood royal history knew exactly what kind of test it had been. Not the kind written in ink or announced in speeches, but the kind whispered behind closed doors where future kings are silently measured and quietly accepted. Because what happened during that sumptuous secret dinner hadn't stayed in Saudi Arabia. Its consequences followed him home like a shadow. Inside Kensington Palace, aides immediately noticed it. He moved differently, not dramatically, not loudly, but with the subtle authority of someone who had crossed an invisible threshold. His conversations became shorter, sharper, more intentional. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was deciding. And those closest to him began to realize something unsettling and electrifying at the same time. The crown wasn't waiting for him anymore. He was moving toward it faster than anyone had expected. He didn't rush into public declarations. That wasn't his style. Instead, he leaned into silence. Silence had become his weapon. Silence had become his signal. Because real power doesn't scream. It breathes slowly, confidently, knowing its moment will come. And in private briefings, foreign envoys began requesting something that sent quiet shockwaves through palace corridors. They weren't asking for King Charles. They were asking for William, that it didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, like gravity. Diplomats from Canada, Japan, and even nations historically cautious around British influence began requesting private audiences with the Prince of Wales himself. They wanted to understand him. They wanted to measure him. They wanted to see if the calm, calculated figure who had shared that dinner in Saudi Arabia was truly becoming what rumors suggested, the invisible sovereign already shaping the world before ever wearing the crown. And William understood exactly what was happening. He didn't celebrate it. He absorbed it because he knew monarchy wasn't maintained by declarations, it was maintained by perception. And perception was changing. Back in London, commentators scrambled to explain what they were witnessing. Some called it evolution, others called it strategy, but those closest to the royal family called it something far more dangerous and far more powerful. They called it inevitability, because William wasn't acting like a prince waiting for permission. He was acting like a king building inevitability around himself, that even his father, King Charles, reportedly began delegating more responsibilities quietly, not publicly, not dramatically, but deliberately. Sensitive foreign briefings began landing on William's desk first. Strategic discussions about global partnerships included him as a central voice, not an observer. It wasn't abdication. It was transition, slow, controlled, and deeply intentional. And William embraced it with frightening calm. He remembered every detail of that Saudi dinner, every pause, every glance, every moment when power revealed itself not through words, but through recognition. Because in that moment, sitting across from another monarchy older than modern politics itself, he realized something most heirs never fully grasp until it's too late. Kingship doesn't begin with a crown. It begins with acceptance, that acceptance by allies, that acceptance by rivals, that acceptance by history itself. And history had begun watching him differently. His global presence intensified, but never recklessly. When he appeared beside world leaders, he didn't dominate conversations. He controlled them quietly. He listened longer than anyone expected. And when he finally spoke, people leaned in, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. He had learned something critical from that secret dinner, that power isn't about commanding attention, it's about becoming impossible to ignore. That behind the scenes, palace insiders whispered about his growing independence. He no longer relied solely on traditional advisors. He began forming his own trusted circle, individuals individuals chosen not for loyalty alone, but for foresight, because he knew the monarchy he would inherit wouldn't survive on tradition alone. It would survive on adaptation. And adaptation required courage. Courage to step into controversial arenas. Courage to build alliances others feared. Courage to redefine what monarchy meant in a world that no longer automatically believed in it. That secret dinner had proven something to him and to everyone watching. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't hesitant. He was ready, but perhaps the most chilling realization came weeks later during a private palace moment few would ever witness. William was alone in his study, the brass falcon still resting on his desk. Its polished surface reflected faint light, its carved message unchanged. Intention builds bridges. He had kept it close, not as decoration, but as reminder, because that gift wasn't just symbolic, it was confirmation. Confirmation that other monarchies already saw him as one of them. He ran his fingers across its surface slowly, replaying that dinner in his mind, the quiet respect, the measured conversation, the subtle acknowledgement that he was no longer simply an heir. He was a participant in shaping the future of global power itself, and in that moment, something crystallized inside him. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was preparing to inherit not just a crown, but responsibility far heavier than gold or jewels. Preparing to lead in ways monarchy had never led before. Preparing to step into a role the world was already beginning to assign him. The public still saw the charming prince, the careful diplomat, the calm, reassuring figure smiling for cameras, but behind that image lived someone transforming faster than anyone realized. That someone who had sat at that secret dinner and understood its true meaning. That someone who had crossed from heir to architect. And somewhere deep within palace walls, among whispered conversations and silent observations, one truth became impossible to deny. That Prince William wasn't just revealing his agenda anymore. He was becoming it.